Get in the game with the college-branded Venmo debit card. Wreck your team with every tap and earn up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash, a new rewards program from Venmo. No monthly fee, no minimum balance, just school pride and spending power. Get in the game and sign up for the Venmo debit card at venmo.com/collegecard. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. Select schools available. Venmo Stash terms and exclusions apply at venmo.me/stash terms. Max $100 cash back per month.
For the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Vaughan, Capitol Bureau Chief and host of Under the Dome. You're listening to our latest episode for the week of February 3rd, 2025. We're actually finally in February. Today I'm joined by my politics team colleagues Avi Bajpai and Kyle Ingram and Korie Dean. We have a lot to talk about. The news has been dominated by things at the federal level, but there's still lots of stuff going on in the state too. Well, I'm going to talk about state or federal again, I guess, or the intersection of it, and start with you, Kyle, about this federal redistricting trial that's starting this week in Raleigh.
Yeah, so after North Carolina's electoral maps were approved by Republicans back in 2023 now, there were pretty quickly some legal challenges to them, and this is no new occurrence for the state. North Carolina has always had battles over its electoral districts with, Democrats and their advocates frequently calling them gerrymanders. And this time around, Republicans were pretty clear that they were drawing districts to favor their own party. I mean, they said that, but the Supreme Court, both at the national level and the state level, have said that partisan gerrymandering isn't something courts can weigh in on. But what this trial that's coming up this week is, though, is arguing that the districts are racially gerrymandered. So two black voters in northeastern North Carolina are arguing that these state Senate districts out in the eastern part of the state crack black voters between two different districts and dilute their voting power in the process. So that's going before a federal judge. The trial will probably take about all week, and we'll see if the judge orders that those districts be redrawn. Is there any indication on what'll happen as far as the judge or with the cases that you think? Yeah, the judge is an appointee of President Bush, and he's ruled against the plaintiffs in the case before. So when they initially brought the case, they were asking for a preliminary injunction to block the map from going into effect before the November elections. And he turned them down, saying that enforcing such a change so close to an election would be dangerous and chaotic. So that could give some insight into how he feels going forward, but a lot more evidence and witness statements are going to go into this trial than they had at that stage. So what'll happen by the end of the week? What can people expect? Well, we shouldn't expect a decision by the end of the week. This is going to be a lot of analysis and talking and witnesses for the judge to deal with. This is not a jury trial, so it'll all be up to the judge. But there could be some filings, in the months following the case too. So we should expect this to take a while. So a couple months as far as before it's... I would say. Okay. I mean, you can always be surprised by the courts, but I would say probably a couple months before there's a decision. Well, speaking of the courts and things that have gone on for months, what is the latest happening this week or not happening about the Riggs-Griffin state Supreme Court race? Yeah, the Supreme Court race that won't end. It's in a really strange position right now where it's simultaneously in state and federal court. What the main issue that we're waiting to hear on now is whether it will be fully taken up by the states or fully taken up by the federal courts. Riggs, the Democrat who appears to have won the race, wants the federal courts to decide this, and Griffin, the Republican who appears to have lost the race, wants the state courts to take it up. So I was in Richmond this past week to watch the Fourth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals hold arguments. Very procedural, very technical stuff, and they haven't weighed in yet, but several of those judges seem to have doubts about whether the court actually has the authority to take this case from the state. So we'll have to see what happens there. Okay. Meanwhile, this past week in Raleigh, the legislature came back into session. Of course, the opening day was a few weeks ago now. This is when the work actually starts, and it's the long session, which means their main purpose is to pass the state budget. We'll take bets on maybe not tax the bets, which we'll get to later, but the budget will play out over maybe through the summer, but policy is getting rolling, and committees for the first few weeks until votes are expected. We had two Helene-related committees. Avi, you were in the House this week.
it's bill filing too. So what are like the big things that people need to know as far as the fact that this work is actually ramping up now?
Yeah, lawmakers returning to Raleigh means that we, in earnest, start getting, bills filed every single day. There were, a flurry of bills filed on this past Wednesday when lawmakers were back. We saw a few bills that have come up in past years and haven't moved forward, so their sponsors have refiled. So to begin with, Representative Keith Kidwell has been working for some time now to pass this bill to basically allow North Carolinians to carry concealed handguns without having to get a permit. This is something that was moving forward in 2023 and then stalled at the last minute and didn't move forward.
What are the chances of it getting a floor vote?
I mean, it's hard to say. We're right at the beginning of long session, so we have to wait and see, is there any immediate movement with this bill or with some of these other bills that are being filed right now? Do they just sort of stay in orbit right now or for a while, or do they actually start getting committee hearings quickly? There were a couple of other interesting bills. At the federal level, President Trump has talked about not taxing tips, and we saw a similar measure brought forward by Republicans here in the state. And then Representative Aaron Paré of Holly Springs had a bill, which was interesting something that I learned this past week, that there's a provision in federal tax law that says you can, there's a deduction for gambling losses, for wagering losses. So she has a bill to apply that to North Carolina as well, which is interesting.
And the bill sponsor of the tips attack, that's Bell, right? Representative John Bell?
I don't remember exactly. I think Harry Warren as well. Yeah.
So a lot of, for people, they should know that bill sponsors are usually an indication of where things go.
Yeah.
And Paré has got more power this session. So bill
she's the chair on the Appropriations Committee this year as well. So
yeah, so usually who's behind it? If you have bipartisan support of a bill, that's usually a pretty good track record already of something, or maybe a bigger fight, like when sports spending first happened. Right?
Yeah.
So we'll see where those go, and more bills being filed, and more committees. We are going to take a break, but before we do, I want to start a little bit with Korie about the UNC Board of Governors that met. If you can give the first thing to know, and then we'll finish up after the break.
Yeah, so obviously a big priority of the legislative session will be the budget, and, lots of groups, state agencies have their own requests, and that includes the UNC system. So the Board of Governors, which oversees all of the public universities, met this week, their first meetings of the year, and kind of laid out at least draft proposals of what they're going to be requesting in the budget, as well as a, quote, not a money ask is how it was phrased, but an ask for some, legislation to help military affiliated students. So I'm happy to talk about that after the break.
Okay, so stay tuned and we'll find out what is probably going to be in their pitch. We'll be right back.
Are you stuck staring at your W-2? Are tax refund worries holding you back? You probably have FOMO, the fear of messing up. The fix? Using TurboTax on Intuit Credit Karma. They find every credit and deduction to help you get every refund dollar you deserve, or your money back. It's time to overcome your fear of messing up and get your taxes done right. Start filing today in the Credit Karma app.
You're listening to Under the Dome. I'm Capitol Bureau Chief Dawn Vaughan, here with Avi Bajpai, Kyle Ingram, and Korie Dean. Before the break, Korie was starting to talk about the Board of Governors and what they're going to be asking for budget season. So let's hear a little more details about what their pitch is going to be.
Yeah, so a lot of it is kind of routine, asks, things like raises for faculty and staff, but there is potentially going to be a change to what's called the performance funding model for campuses. So campuses in the UNC system are funded kind of in lots of ways, but for this purposes, in kind of in two different buckets. One would be enrollment funding. So that's how many student credit hours students on campus are taking. They get funding based on those numbers. But there are also a set of metrics that campuses strive to meet, and they receive funding based on how well they meet some of those metrics. So, think things like graduation rate or student retention, kind of those types of metrics. And the legislature has not funded that performance piece how the system would like it to. I think at least the past budget, maybe the one before. And so the system is going to ask for there to be a set pool of performance funding, and it would be $30 million that the campuses would split based on how well they achieve those metrics. System staff has said that they've heard from legislators that there's a bit of concern about not having as much control over how much money campuses are getting for performance spending. They'd like to have a little bit more oversight on it. So system staff thinks that this model, which aligns more with the community college system, would help a little bit. There are also, campus-specific asks, things like the UNC School of Civic Life, some NC State engineering expansion. Also like some Helene funding for the Western North Carolina campuses. So kind of a wide array. But something I'll be interested to follow, I mentioned before the break that there's going to be an effort to try to help military affiliated students. And this kind of comes from the idea that there is a federally established military tuition assistance rate, which is $250 per credit hour. But classes in the UNC system through a partnership called Project Kitty Hawk, which is online learning, right now exceed that. So the Board of Governors is going to ask the legislature for, again, not a money ask, but for some flexibility to allow them to give some flexibility on tuition so that it is at or below the $250, so that military students in North Carolina can actually take advantage of classes in the system and not have to get those from out of state. So.
I feel like the budget this year is going to be so focused on Helene recovery and how much money or future rainy day fund. I think how much people are asking is going to get perhaps a little more scrutiny, or money that they've already allocated. Mm-hmm. All right, moving back in time to the election last year, which Governor Josh Stein defeated Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson. And I think everybody knows about the scandal and everything. Well, let's talk about that lawsuit, Kyle, as just before we were recording today on Friday, news came out about Robinson.
Yeah, so after CNN published its report on Mark Robinson's string of online comments saying racist and sexually graphic things, Robinson announced he was suing CNN for defamation, initially saying he was going to sue for $50 million before they realized that North Carolina state law says you can't specify an amount above $25,000. But on Friday, he announced that he's dropping that lawsuit just a few months after it was filed. He put out a statement saying that it's futile to continue litigating this. And he also essentially said that he's probably going to be ending his political career. He said he has no plans to run for office next year and no plans to run for office in the future. Sort of putting to bed some speculation that he might have challenged Republican Senator Tom Tillis in the primary next year.
All right. So maybe we've heard the last on the political stage from Robinson. We'll see. Certainly not from Tillis, since he's already running again, and obviously is the incumbent. All right. Let's move on to our picks for Headliner of the Week. Korie, turning it back to you for Headliner.
Yeah. A couple of Fridays ago, by the time this goes up, UNC Chancellor Lee Roberts was speaking to the faculty council at UNC. He typically goes to these meetings, takes questions from faculty. Sometimes they ask a lot, sometimes they don't. But at this meeting, it being the first one after Trump had taken office again, there were quite a few questions about immigration and students as well as ICE. And Lee Roberts said multiple times that the university would comply with, follow the law on undocumented students and immigration. a professor asked, if ICE asks for information from professors on undocumented students, what should we do? He kind of reiterated again that the university would comply with, quote, any requests from law enforcement about undocumented students or anything else. So obviously that, led to some outcry from people on campus. We've seen lots of school systems, whether K-12 or universities, kind of have to confront this issue now that schools are no longer considered sensitive or protected from ICE. The ACLU now has spoken out against this about Robert's comments. So, it will be interesting to see what actually happens. But he's come out pretty clearly about at least what UNC will do.
More news on that as things play out. I'll go next for my headliner, turning it back to the legislature. House Speaker Destin Hall released a House calendar in this handy-dandy graphic with color coding that you can save your phone, look at your calendar. I actually texted it to my husband and said, by the way, this is a lot of my work schedule the next few months, where he outlines what committee days are, what days votes are, and probable votes. And it's a pretty big change from former Speaker Tim Moore's way of running the House. Believe there was applause when he released the calendar. It'll save, end of session questions from House members who just want to know what the rest of their week is going to go like. And this is Hall in the start anyway. We'll see how it ends up panning out months into the year. And then also there's that other chamber, the Senate. But I'll give Hall or whoever within his office, their idea, a shout out for having a nice graphic telling us what the calendar might be. Although every year, we get fooled on when things are going to happen. So
yeah, I was going to say there was not a color code for pass a budget by July 1. So that seems like maybe a tradition.
Reporters that talked to Hall after, someone had asked about, like, you mean the budget too? And then he was like, well, the main policy is what. So, we'll see. So, all right, Avi, I'll turn to you next for your headliner.
Yeah, so the calendar was one of the big things that came up on Wednesday, but also lawmakers spent a good amount of time on the floor giving really emotional, heartfelt tributes to the late Representative Joe John, who recently passed away after throat cancer diagnosis. Lots of speeches from leaders in both parties, other colleagues of John's. Even the speaker giving a heartfelt tribute. So that was a notable moment.
I feel like when we mentioned before, when Representative John passed away, maybe last week, we'd mentioned that Clampett was one of the regular House members there. Also, Donna McDowell White, a Republican representative, and she had some kind words for him. She was one of the regulars too for those no vote sessions. So he obviously made lasting impact on a lot of people in a bipartisan way, which can't be said for every lawmaker, I guess, right?
Yeah.
All right, Kyle, we'll end with you. What is your pick for headliner of the week?
Yeah, so before the legislative session kicked off, as I mentioned, I went to Richmond to cover the Supreme Court case, and it was a great city. It was my first time there, and I gotta say, as a native North Carolinian who really loves North Carolina, I think Virginia has us beat on their state capital. It's really nice.
Wow,
it's nicer than
rude.
ours.
No.
As somebody who lived in Virginia for decades and loves North Carolina more, I'm going to say you just got to let the legislative building grow on you. I mean, the Capitol building is pretty cool, too.
Well, they don't use it, though. And it's much smaller than the Virginia one.
Okay.
And the legislative building, it's like all 70s looking. Like, it could be nicer.
It could. Like the Wisconsin state capitol, which I've been in, and I'm sorry, nothing beats Wisconsin. Not that I've been to every state capitol, but I'm sure one of our listeners has probably visited every state capitol. Avi, what were you going to chime in with?
I was going to say, I agree with your assessment, Kyle, but the the ledge has its charm. So
It
It'd be
does.
nice if they
I'll
had
stick up
parking
for it.
spots
It's
as
a nice
well.
time capsule back to
Yeah.
mid-century.
Edward Durrell Stone, the architecture.
But it also-
when you
Kennedy
spend
Center.
enough time in there on a particular day, if you have a long day, it feels like time has stopped. Anyway.
It feels like the back rooms. I've been working there for like 2 years now, and I still can't realize where I am. Like, they all look the same. All the halls look the same.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's some metaphor
There's a
with
metaphor
government.
there for sure.
Yeah. All right, for the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Vaughan with Kyle Ingram, Korie Dean, Abby Bajpai, and producing today, Kevin Keister. Thank you for listening, and we will talk to you tomorrow, or next week.
For more from our politics team, subscribe to the News and Observer at newsobserver.com/subscribe. Follow us on Twitter at Under the Dome and NC Insider, and sign up for our weekly political newsletter, also called Under the Dome, at newsobserver.com/newsletters. Thanks for listening.